phrase of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, like the child who does not reason and has no care, we trust ourselves to the Divine, that the Divine's will may be done. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo SABCL, Volume 16, Book The Supramental Manifestation, 54th Volume, The Yoga and Its Objects, page 409, date 28th October 1934. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the yoga, the integral yoga we practice, is not for ourselves alone, but for the Divine. Its aim is to work out the will of the Divine in the world, to effect a spiritual transformation, and to bring down a divine nature and a divine life into the mental, vital, and physical nature and life of humanity. Its object is not a personal mukti, although mukti is a necessary condition of the yoga, but the liberation and transformation of the human being. It is not a personal need, for the soul is Nitya Mukta and the bondage is an illusion. We play at being bound. We are not really bound. We can be free when God wills, for He, our Supreme Self, is the master of our game, and without His grace and permission, no soul can leave the game. It is often God's will in us to take through the mind the boga of ignorance, of the dualities of joy and grief, of pleasure and pain, of virtue and sin, of enjoyment and renunciation. For long ages, in many countries, he never even thinks of the yoga but plays out this play century after century without wearing of it. There is nothing evil in this, nothing which we need condemn or from which we need shrink. It's God's play. The wise man is he who recognizes this truth and knowing his freedom, yet plays out God's play, waiting for his command to change the methods of the game. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the command is now. God always keeps for himself a chosen country in which the higher knowledge is through all chances and dangers by the few or the many continually preserved, and for the present in the Chatur Yuga at least that country is India. Whenever he chooses to take the full pleasure of the ignorance of the dualities of strife and wrath and tearness and weakness and selfishness, the tamasic and rajasic pleasures of the play of the Kali, in short, he dims the knowledge in India and puts her down into weakness and degradation, so that she may retire into herself and not interfere with this moment of his Leela. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, when he wants to rise up from the mud and Narayana in man to become once again mighty and wise and blissful, Then he once more pours out the knowledge on India and raises her up so that she may give the knowledge with its necessary consequence of might, wisdom, and bliss to the whole world. When there is the contracted movement of knowledge, the yogins in India withdraw from the world and practice yoga for their own liberation and delight or for the liberation of a few disciples. But when the movement of knowledge again expands and the soul of India expands with it, they come forth once more and work in the world and for the world. Yogins like Janaka, Ajatashatru, Kartavirya once more sit on the thrones of the world and govern the nations. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, God's Leela in man moves always in a circle from Satya Yuga to Kali and through Kali to the Satya, from the age of gold to the age of iron and back again through the iron to the gold. In modern language, the Satya Yuga is a period of the world in which a harmony, stable and sufficient, is created and man realizes for a time under certain conditions and limitations the perfection of his being. The harmony exists in his nature by the force of a settled purity, but afterwards it begins to break down and man upholds it in the Treta by the force of will, individual and collective. It breaks down further and he attempts to uphold it in the Dwapara by intellectual regulation and common consent and rule. Then in the Kali Yuga, it finally collapses and is destroyed. But the Kali Yuga is not merely evil. In it, the necessary conditions are progressively built up for a new Satya Yuga, another harmony, a more advanced perfection. In the period of Kali Yuga, which has passed, still endures in its effects, but is now at the end, there has been a general destruction of the ancient knowledge and culture. Only a few fragments remain to us in the Vedas, Upanishads, and other sacred works in the world's confused traditions. But the time is at hand for a first movement upward, the first attempt to build up a new harmony and perfection. That is the reason why so many ideas are abroad for the perfection of human society, knowledge, religion, and morals, but the true harmony has not yet been found. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says it is only India that can discover the harmony because it is only by a change, not a mere readjustment, of man's present nature that it can be developed, and such a change is not possible except by yoga. The nature of man and of things at present, a discord, a harmony that has got out of tune. The whole heart and action and mind of man must be changed, but from within, not from without, not by political and social institutions, not even by creeds and philosophies, but by realization of God in ourselves and the world, and a remolding of life by that realization. This can only be effected by a Purna Yoga, a yoga not devoted to a particular purpose, even though that purpose may be mukti or ananda, but to the fulfillment of the divine humanity in ourselves and others. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, for this purpose, the practices of Hatha and Raja Yoga are not sufficient, and even the Trimarga will not serve. We must go higher and resort to the Adhyatmak Yoga. The principle of the Adhyatma Yoga is in knowledge, the realization of all things that we see or do not see but are aware of men, things, ourselves, events, gods, titans, angels, as one divine Brahman, and an action and attitude, an absolute self surrender to the Paratpara Purusha, the transcendent, infinite, and universal personality, who is at once personal and impersonal, finite and infinite, self limiting and illimitable, one and many, and informs with his being not only the gods above, but man and the worm and the clod below. Our Lord says the surrender must be complete. Nothing must be reserved, no desire, no demand, no opinion, no idea that this must be, that cannot be, that this should be, and that should not be. All must be given. The heart must be purified of all desire, the intellect of all self will. Every duality must be renounced, the whole world, seen and unseen, must be recognized as one supreme expression of concealed wisdom, power, and bliss, and the entire being given up as an engine is passive in the hands of the driver, for the divine love, might, and perfect intelligence to do its work and fulfill its divine Leela. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says Ahankara must be blotted out in order that we may have, as God intends us ultimately to have, the perfect bliss, the perfect calm and knowledge, and the perfect activity of the divine existence. If this attitude of perfect self surrender can be even imperfectly established, all necessity of yogic kriya inevitably ceases. For then God Himself in us becomes the sadhaka and the siddha, and His divine power works in us not by our artificial processes but by a working of nature which is perfectly informed, all searching, and infallibly efficient. Even the most powerful Raja Yogic Samyama, the most developed Pranayama, the most strenuous meditation, the most ecstatic bhakti, the most self denying action, mighty as they are and efficacious, are comparatively weak in their results when set beside the supreme working. For all those are all limited to a certain extent by our capacity, but this is illimitable in potency because it is God's capacity. It is only limited by His will, which knows that what is best for the world and for each of us in the world and apart from it. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the first process of the integral yoga is to make the sankalpa of Atma Samarpana. Let me repeat. The first process of integral yoga is to make the sankalpa of Atma Samarpana. Put yourself with all your heart and all your strength into God's hands. Make no conditions. Ask for nothing, not even for siddhi in the yoga, for nothing at all except that in you and through you His will may be directly performed. To those who demand from Him, God gives what they demand. But to those who give themselves and demand nothing, He gives everything that might otherwise have asked or needed. And in addition, He gives Himself and the spontaneous boons of His love. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the next process is to stand aside and watch the working of the divine power in yourself. This working is often attended with disturbance and trouble in the system. Therefore, faith is necessary. Though perfect faith is not always possible at once, for whatever impurity is in you, harbored openly or secretly lurking, is likely to rise at first and be repeated so long as it is not exhaustively swept out, and doubt in this age is an almost universal impurity. But even when doubt assails, stand by and wait for it to pass, availing yourself, if possible, of the satsanga of those who are already advanced on the path. But when that is absent, still holding fast to the principle of the integral yoga, self surrender. When distressed within or assailed from without, remember the words of the Gita. By giving thyself up in heart and mind to me, thou shalt cross over all difficulties and perils by my grace. And again, abandon all dharmas, all law, rule, means, and codes of every kind, whether formed by previous habit and belief or imposed from outside, and take refuge in me alone. I will deliver thee from all sin and evil. Do not grieve. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, I will deliver. You have not to be troubled or struggle yourself as if the responsibility were yours or the result dependent on your efforts. A mightier than you is busy with the matter. Neither disease nor calamity nor the rising of sin and impurity in you should cause any alarm. Hold fast only to Him. I will deliver thee from all sin and evil. But the release does not come by a sudden miracle, it comes by a process of purification, and these things are a part of the process. They are like dust that rises in clouds when a room long uncleaned is at last swept out. Though the dust seems to choke you, yet persevere. And Lord Sri Aurobindo says, in order to stand aside, you must know yourself as the Purusha who merely watches, consents to God's work, holds up and enjoys the fruits that God gives. The work itself is done by God as Shakti, by Kali, and is offered up by her as a yajna to Sri Krishna. You are Yajamana, who sees the sacrifice done, whose presence is necessary to every moment of the sacrifice, and who tastes its result. This separation of yourself, this renunciation of the idea of yourself as the doer, is easier if you know what the Adhar is. About the Buddhi, which is the highest function of the mind, is the higher buddhi or vijnana, the seat of the satya dharma, truth of knowledge, truth of bhava, truth of action, and above this ideal faculty is the ananda or the cosmic bliss in which the divine part of you dwells. It is of this vijnana and this ananda that Christ spoke as the kingdom of God that is within you. We at present are awake, Jagrat, in the lower moments, but Sushupta, fast asleep in the Vijnana and the Ananda. We have to awaken these levels of consciousness within us, and their awakening and unmixed activity is the Siddhi of the Yoga. For when that happens, we gain the condition of the being which is called in the Gita dwelling in God, of which Sri Krishna speaks when he says, Verily, thou shalt dwell in me. Once it is gained, we are free and blessed and have everything which we strive. The third progress of the yoga is to perceive all things as God. First, as a rule, in the process of knowledge, one comes to see pervading all space and time one divine impersonal existence without movement, distinction, or feature, in which all names and forms seem to stand with a very doubtful or very minor reality. In this realization, the one may seem to be the only one reality and everything else is Maya, a purposeless and inflexible illusion. But afterwards, if you do not stop short and limit yourself by the impersonal realization, you will come to see the same Atman not only containing and supporting all created things, but informing and filling them, and eventually you will be able to understand that even the names and forms are Brahman. You will then be able to live more and more in the knowledge which the Upanishads and the Gita hold up as a rule of life. You will see the self in all existing things and all the existing things in the self. You will be aware of all the things as Brahman, the world as an expression, play or Leela of an infinite divine personality. When you see in all, not the impersonal Atman, which is the basis of the manifest existence, although you do not lose that knowledge, but Sri Krishna, who at once is, basis and transcends all manifest and unmanifest existence. For behind the Atman is the silence of the Asat, which the Buddhist nihilists realize as Shunyam, and beyond that silence is the Paratpara Purusha. It is He who has made the world out of His being and is immanent in and sustains it as the infinite finite Ishvara, Ananta and Shanta, Shiva and Narayana, Sri Krishna, the Leela Maya, who draws all of us to Him by His love, compels all of us by His masteries, and places eternal play of joy and strength and beauty in the manifold world. The world is only a play of His being, knowledge and delight, Sat Chit Ananda. Matter itself, you will one day realize, is not material. It is not substance but of consciousness. But form of consciousness, guna, the result of quality of being perceived by sense knowledge. Solidity itself is only a combination of gunas, samhati and dhruti, cohesion and permanence, a state of conscious being, nothing else. Matter, life and mind, what is beyond mind, is all Sri Krishna, the Ananta Guna Brahman, playing in the world as Sachidananda. When we have this realization, when we dwell in it securely and permanently, all possibilities of grief, sin, fear, delusion, internal strife and pain are driven puissantly from our being. We realize in our experience the truth of the Upanishads. He who possesses the delight of the Brahman has no fear from anything in the world, and the other in the Isha Upanishad, when all created things become one with a man's self by getting the knowledge, Vijnana, thereafter what bereavement can he have, or what grief, when in all things he sees the oneness? The whole world then appears to us in a changed aspect as an ocean of beauty, good, light, bliss, exultant movement on a basis of eternal strength and peace. We see all things as Shubha, Shiva, Mangala, Anandamaya. We become one in soul with all beings, Sarva Bhutatmana, and having steadfastly this experience, are able by contact, by oneness, by the reaching out of love, to communicate it to others so that we become a center of radiation of this divine state, Brahmi Sthiti, throughout our world. We'll continue.